Welcome, folks, to the first weekly version of the podcast. I'm Mike, of course, and this is Bugs right here, not doing much, is just medicating himself. Hope that everyone is out there enjoying themselves, having a good Tuesday afternoon, February 3rd, 2026, and I'm just going to come on here and do something very quick, because I haven't got anything really planned. I just had something that came up in my mind to say as I wake up this morning about something that really has bothered me about society. The disposability of our culture. What I mean by that is, once upon a time, when I was growing up, a lot of things were very expensive. Like anything worthwhile, like a TV set, a stereo, furniture, appliances. All these things were incredibly expensive, but they also had something else in common. They were made in North America, and sometimes even Canada. Those were the way things were. You didn't just buy stuff to replace every week, every month, every year, by the whim, and by everything like that. You kept it for a long period of time. And because it was terribly expensive, because of relative value, it had more relative value, it was built better, easier to fix, and such, on purpose, so that what would happen was, because it's so expensive, you fixed it. You typically tended to fix it, because fixing it and having a job for someone else down the line, instead of throwing it out and creating more waste, was easier on the economy than having to replace it all the time with more crap. What happened? I'll tell you what happened. Time happened. Greed. Capitalism happened. Many manufacturers realized, as the world developed in the parts of the world, the third world, especially Asia and that, as countries like Japan and Korea and China, all these economies started to develop, they had one resource they had lots of. What was that? People. And most of these economies, since we're developing economies, they didn't pay them a lot of money. They didn't make a lot of money. Most of these people are poor and destitute. We're willing to work for pennies. The only thing that we're missing is skills. So what happened? Companies would eventually, slowly over time, move their manufacturing, many major names that eventually used to live here, like Electron, Philips, Admiral, names that we recognize from our childhood. RCA. Companies like that used to exist in our childhood that were building products in North America for a North American market and had a secondary market in replacement parts and repairs. Things like the Maytag repairman. I remember other commercials with the Maytag repairman would say, oh, that's the Maytag repairman going to place. The reason why you remember things from Maytag is because it was a fairly expensive appliance that was built fairly well, but it was like everything else. It did break down eventually. It broke. And we'd fix things, and they would fix here, and the parts we made here. Eventually that shifted. Parts started being made in other countries because that was the first phase of the migration process, making components of the main thing elsewhere. More simpler mechanisms got made in other countries where it became less expensive to make because of the cost of labor and the availability of space net, and favorable tax breaks from countries attempting to attract labor to these countries and desperately to attract labor. As they became more skilled, more and more of the manufacturing process shifted there too, till eventually you barely see anything of any substantial range, TVs, appliances, or not, actually still made either in Canada or even North America or even Mexico, which is kind of funny because there is some stuff made in Mexico now. That's the sort of last bastion of American manufacturing if you consider North America and Mexico's part of it. They're the last bastion of low labor. They eventually will fade in time too as they become too expensive. And then what happened because of that? A lot of things came down in price, especially consumer electronics. The thing is, you could buy a big screen TV set for $300 or $400 in today's money, which would be equivalent of several $100 or $200 or $300. If you took it back in their money, it'd be probably about $50, $75 to buy a big TV. And look at it, we were paying $600 to $1,000 for a tiny basic 23-inch television set, wood grain cabinet, Admiral TV or RC or whatever. And we'd end up fixing it. We went from tubes to solid state to modular to integrated circuits to plastic and plastic everything with chips and ICs, and eventually all that technology and all that thing as technology went from tubes to LCD panels or LED, depending which type of technology you use in terms of TV sets. And because of that, and moving all that manufacturing, the cost of overall manufacturing went lower because the moving into a place was less expensive to make. Ultimately, these things became cheaper, and what happened became disposable by their very nature. So you really see most of the people buying a $2,000 TV set. The ones buying a $2,000 TV set are buying it because they're not looking to change it every 6 months or a year or 2 years. They don't have to worry about that. They're perfectly willing to fix it, or they just got so much bad money they don't care, and they just dispose of it for another one. They give it to Goodwill or whatever when they get used to it. If it's still working, they want to remodel, they'll just download it down to someone else. Doesn't matter to them. It's a write-off. It's the cost of doing business, the cost of always being ahead of the game. The rest of us, we get things like this and we throw them away. Problem is, nobody's around to fix them anymore. All the expertise that was out there, the technicians, all the people designing this stuff, all this technology, most of it is went away somewhere else. It's not in this part of the world anymore. So if you want to fix things, a lot of times they're so much more expensive to fix, it's went the other way. It used to be things were expensive to buy, relatively inexpensive to fix, so you could carry them for a long time until they were beyond repair and become the cost of diminishing returns of the cost of repairing was greater than buying a new one with greater technology and advances and such, that you would take that instead and get rid of the old one. Now it's the other way around. The paradigm's the opposite way. You get big things built at a relatively inexpensive price relative to the prices in terms of the cost of living and the inflation rate based on old money. And what happens is it costs massive amounts of money to fix for the few things that are fixable, things like fridges, stoves, etc., things that are typically harder to move out, that typically most people will consider refixing or replacing before replacing just because of the nature of the inconvenience of doing it. But TVs are disposable as fuck. Like everything else in society, cell phones. I don't know, I got caught in the trap with cell phones. I was buying a cell phone every 2 years. Why? Because they made it so the battery, the one component you would normally change in a cell phone, not the only thing that really goes in a cell phone or time other than other components, but the main thing that you end up using up the most is irreplaceable. It's more expensive to replace. It's diminishingly hard to get the batteries sometimes. Sometimes you can get the batteries, but then you got to pay someone to open it up. It used to be you just take the back off, put a battery in yourself, press the changeo, you got another battery, your phone's brand new all over again for another couple years to the next battery. Then you dispose of the battery and a proper recycling thing, and then they did something with it, and then pressure change, the environment was saved. Now these things are made to the point that what ends up happening a lot of times, they get recycled, yeah, but in a different way. What ends up people end up doing is selling them back to the company sometimes. They'll do a refurbishment. What's the difference between refurbishment, which is the way they do it now, and you just taking the battery yourself and slapping it back in there, and the fact is you have to buy a new one. Or sometimes even buy back the very same one if you don't refuse to if you don't have a repair shop in your town that you went and sent them in the first place to refurbish for a ridiculous amount of money. Like it's like not new, but pretty close to being new, about half the price of new, but still a lot more expensive than it was if you would have changed that by yourself, assuming the rest of it was still working. Now, in some cases, if the thing is really broken, screens and all that done, then you're going beyond refurbishment. You're going to replacement at that point in time. But a majority of them, more of the refurbished items are usually minor cosmetic changes to be fixed into them, mostly things like batteries. And then they charge a half as much as it would cost for the thing because it's cheaper, but they can make it for about a third or less the cost of that because they're the manufacturers in most cases, and they have access to the parts on cheap, and they use cheap labor. What has happened to the pride of making things here, making things last, instead of worrying about being disposable? And we're talking about all this recycling, but the thing is, we wouldn't have to recycle so damn much if we didn't throw away so much. If we didn't dispose of so many big things for being repairable, then have to deal with the consequences of recycling them. So I think what we need to do is we need to start thinking of the culture. Think about your own personal life. Think about a way that maybe, what is something that you could make or needs something that really be a useful type of thing to make in society that doesn't exist. And you can make here that could cost a relatively decent amount of money, a reasonable amount of money, I should say. They can make here in Canada to sell to Canadians that can be either repaired or could be replaced and recycled very quickly internally in our country here, where we could retake the parts and just make another one from it and just keep the cycle going and cut down the amount of virgin materials, cut down the amount of things that are imported, cut down the things that are shipped long distances away, in this case across the Asian thing through the channel on lots of fuel in these big steamer trucks, tanksters that spill all kinds of smoke and oil, as opposed to the trucks just going across North America, which they travel all the time. The reason why we get away with it partly is because these container ships come across the border with things to send us, the cheap crap, and what they do is those same container trucks will come back with raw materials they need because these places have no raw materials. They have no wood, they have no oil, they have nothing. They have to get everything from the manufacturing process. The only thing they got is labor. Space for the buildings and cheap labor, and that's it. Few resources, but mostly those other things. They're literally buying raw materials off us and we buy the finished crap that they manufacture for us that we know that is eventually going to have to be replaced anyway because it's crap, and that's just the way it is. Anyway, that's my 2 Loonies worth for today. Tune in tomorrow when I find more things that piss my life off about the world that I discuss and rant about, because it's kind of becoming a rant, because my 2 Loonies worth is going to probably become a rant channel, a simple rant channel. And what's the time that I've got there on the clock, Mr. Clock Keeper? I don't know. I can't read the clock. What time is it? Okay, it's less than 10 minutes, I think. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. If you like what I'm doing on this channel, like, comment, subscribe. If you don't like it, still comment. Comment on the page itself, or comment on info@endtimemedia.ca. That's my website, and I'm going to attempt to read all the emails and go through them and respond to them. Anyone with insightful responses will get responses right. Anyone that are being just a smartass, I'll read it, get a good laugh, and I may respond back to you in kind. How about that for a contract? So anyway, this is a Tuesday 90-day show, Tuesday, February the 3rd. Was it February 4th? Okay. No, 3rd, sorry, because the 4th is another thing I'm thinking of. February the 4th, 2026. I'm Mike. This is Bugs as usual. And this is another long series of weekly episodes. 5 days a week of me ranting about something else that I'm really pissed off about, and maybe give you something to think about too. And maybe we'll get some comments about that regarding what some ideas and thoughts about what you think about this particular thing, because I can't be the only one thinking about it, can I? Really can't. Anyway, with that on the gray, going to end the broadcast for now. Talk to you later. I'm going to find my... Oh, geez, my mouse is... I'm going to chase my mouse here. Get older. Eee. Found the button. So, with that sort of rant, talk to you soon. Take care. See you tomorrow. Bye for now.